All right, welcome back to another episode of the Partnership Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. Today's guest is one of the most prominent figures in B2B SaaS, someone I personally look up to and lucky enough to call a friend, none other than Bob Moore, co-founder and CEO of Crossbeam. If you've ever talked about overlap data or built a 2x2 matrix or tried to prove your worth as a partner leader, you've already felt his influence. He's helped shape today how the best GTMs teams think about ecosystems, and today we're going to dig into that story. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris. Great to be here. Really thrilled to get some quality time with you. It'll be fun.
Likewise. Really excited to chat. Cool. Well, Bob, before we get into the thick of the conversation, I always start with each guest by giving 5 quick hitting questions, a little bit lighthearted, just the first thing that comes to mind. You ready for that?
You got it.
All right, cool. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't start with this one. What's the best Philly cheesesteak in your opinion, and how should it actually be prepared?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm old school enough. I'm gonna date myself, right? Because there's a big rift in the cheesesteak philosophy wars right now because there is this whole like Seagull Cooper Sharp cheese movement that is kind of taking over the popular consensus about the way to do it, which is a completely delicious way to make a cheesesteak, but in my mind is not like a classic Philly cheesesteak. You want thin cut but not chopped up ribeye American cheese with onions is kind of like my classic go-to. And my OG like best cheesesteak ever is in its prime Tony Luke's, which holy crap, if you want to read about Philly drama, check out the story behind Tony Luke's and the evolution of that restaurant and that family. But man, they know how to make a good cheesesteak and a roast pork and everything else at Front and Oregon and Philly. So probably more information than you were looking for, but my standard go-to.
Oh, that's amazing. I vividly remember my first time in Philly, actually, for Supernode, when I had my first authentic Philly cheesesteak. I think I had to go lay down for 3 hours in my hotel room afterwards before the rest of the night.
You're more cheesesteak than man after eating one of those things. You gotta let your digestion take over. Yeah.
100%. Cool. Next one. You're famous for 2x2 matrices, right? Especially in the partner ecosystem.
My favorite.
What started that obsession, and what's your favorite 2x2?
Oh, this is great. What did start that obsession? I think it's even before I seemed to use a 2x2 matrix to explain everything, one of my go-to catchphrases that anybody who's worked in any of my companies will tell you is like, 2 things are allowed to be true at the same time. And I think it's a pretty common like logical fallacy that, people when making an argument will say, well, this can't be true because this other thing is true. And it's very rare that things in this world are actually mutually exclusive, right? So it's I think a lot easier to think about the idea that 2 things can be true at the same time by mapping those 2 things on a matrix and kind of saying like yes, no, and yes, no, and you end up with 4 possible situations. And a lot of times when people get confused by edge cases or they're trying to optimize for a particular scenario, the reality is you're really working on more than one dimension at a time, right? So a 2x2 is just a great way of saying there are conditions under which this is a good thing and maybe conditions under which it's a bad thing. And those conditions are another variable that you might have control over, right? So it just comes up all the time in business and in strategy and in trying to do decision making in day to day.
Well, I'm fully converted. Trust me, I'm fully converted. I have fully embraced it. And a big one for me was when I read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 book, which I'm not sure if you've read that one, but he has this famous chart that I can't unsee, which was he's basically just talking about on the y-axis it's innovation, which is the whole 0 to 1 concept, really just ingenuity and innovation, and on the x-axis it's globalization, really just distribution effects for something that's already been invented, and that kind of just opened my mind to the world, and so I think of 2x2 matrices in the same way as you put it.
Makes a ton of sense, yeah. Sweet.
Next one. What's one surprising skill or lesson you've taken from doing stand-up improv that you apply in your day-to-day?
Yeah. I'll skip all the obvious like yes and stuff like that. Right? Like we've all read that think piece. I think that there's this behavioral thing that that improv I think really, really instilled in me that I did not have before I was doing it, that has turned into like one of the things that makes me enjoy my job a lot more, which is if you can see it, the audience can see it. And what that means is, like, if I'm doing an improv scene and I'm, standing at the counter at a drugstore and talking to someone else in the scene with me on the other side, and all of a sudden I walk across the stage, and we had previously established that there was a counter there, and I just walked right through the counter. The scene is not about my trip to the drugstore anymore. The scene is about the fact that I am a guy who can magically walk through counters. And like the reality of the scene is the perception of the audience and what the audience has seen. And when you have a moment that takes you out of that moment, that creates like a continuity disruption, that it kind of creates like a cognitive dissonance for people that are listening or watching, it is your responsibility as an improv performer to recognize that that has happened. Pay enough attention to know that it's happened, acknowledge it, and then incorporate it into what you're doing. And I think about this every single time we have a stand-up meeting at Crossbeam, every single time we're doing an all-hands meeting, anytime that like I'm doing a keynote presentation, like if you stumble over your words, or if you trip and fall, or if a demo doesn't go the way that you want, or you wish something was one way, and you think just for a second that the audience knows, the audience noticed, the audience is having this thought, being able to acknowledge their point of view, A, shows that you're paying attention, B, like allows you to inject humor. It's inherently funny anytime you do that. Like the comic relief, because it's this release of tension that exists in the cognitive dissonance between you and the audience, right? So like some of the best scenes that I ever participated in with my improv team were ones that just went completely off the rails because somebody like fumbled over their words and said a phrase that didn't make any sense, or somebody did something with the physicality of the scene that had to be called out. And it took us in this completely other direction where you bring vulnerability and you bring honesty into it, and you suddenly can tap into something else. And that's like, like applying that in real life, I think is a really great mantra to kind of live by.
I love that. Sounds like there's a lot of transferable skills that have helped you to be a successful entrepreneur and founder as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's also just a great thing that is so unbelievably unrelated to work when I need it to be. Like it is the true antithesis of like B2B tech sales, right? It's like going into a like smelly basement with a bunch of people
strangers,
and that you're astronauts on Mars for 20 minutes to try to get a laugh, right?
Love that.
Love the game. Yeah.
Cool. Second last one here, and then we'll get into it, is who's one thought leader on LinkedIn that if you're scrolling and you see their post, you're going to stop every time and treat that wisdom like gospel?
Oh, wow. This is really great. I always love when people that are not thought leaders on LinkedIn, who maybe even don't totally respect LinkedIn or like habitate there all that much, but who have kind of like accomplished interesting things in their lives and careers, just spontaneously appear almost like they were like spawned onto LinkedIn for 30 seconds and then they probably won't log in again for 4 years. And like when I think about old colleagues of mine from my previous companies who like they might only post to LinkedIn when they have a big life event, like they change jobs or they haven't sat down and written a blog post for 4 years and they finally did it because they really believed in something so much that they wanted to put pen to paper. So like, if I see a blog post from like Jake Stein, my old co-founder from RJ Metrics, who's now the CEO of Common Paper, like he's no LinkedIn rat, right? But he'll show up every once in a while, and when he has something to say, like it's usually pretty good. And it's almost like people who do not subscribe to the compulsion of needing to post because the clock has ticked, but instead they only say something when they have something to say. That's like my favorite category.
I love it. Giving a spotlight for those who don't want the spotlight. I think that's a great place to take it. And then the last one here is
it's usually like 8 likes on stuff like that, right? It's not because there's no audience bill. The algorithm doesn't know what to do with the content. It's optimized in 0 ways, but it ends up being like the stuff I actually enjoy the most.
Love that. Cool. Last one. I'll make this a quick one. If you weren't in SaaS or startups or a founder, what would your alternate career path be?
Oh man, I grew up in just outside of Philadelphia, and it is like the farthest place in the country from LA and from Hollywood. And I think because of that, I have this very weird interest and fascination with celebrity and celebrities. Like, I'm in my 40s. I literally to this day don't think I've ever met or encountered a single celebrity. Like one time, maybe I walked past like Emma Stone in New York on the street. I'm not totally sure it was her, but that's like as close as I've gotten. Most people have like a celebrity encounter story, and it's just like where my life has taken me. I've never been in the midst of like a movie being filmed or like a bunch of famous people hanging out at a club that I was at or something. It's just like, so because of that, anytime I get anywhere close to Hollywood or the entertainment industry, or frankly, this is probably where the improv thing comes from. Right? It's like a stage and an audience. It really lights up my brain, and I get like irrationally fascinated and like giddy about it. So I guess my answer is like, I don't think I'm funny enough to be a comedian or talented enough to be a singer or an actor, but like, I don't know, maybe like a movie producer, like Hollywood, something or other, something in that world, I'd say.
Love it. Love it. Well, I'm sure people are going to be saying, "Oh, I just saw Bob Moore across the street." Right? That's the track that you're on. So you're going to be checking off boxes for others.
My parole officer is going to be very happy.
Cool. All right, great warm up. Now let's get into the fun stuff. Let's start with your first challenge, right? Obviously you already been a successful entrepreneur with RJ Metrics, and then you pivoted into selling ecosystem internally. So let's rewind to the beginning.
Yeah.
First question is, in the early days of Crossbeam, you weren't just shipping your product, you were naming a new category. So what did those first investor decks and internal debates look like before you landed on your narrative?
Yeah, this is a really. I still have all of them. That probably I can send you like a zip file because they're really fun to look at about what we got right and what we were like not right on. I think the things that stick with me that really held up is like one of the first slides of the seed deck said something like, partner tech is a terrible category and you should never invest in it. I always love like, speaking of like, say the things that the audience can see that you think they know as well, right? I knew enough, having built a couple of businesses and raised money in the past, about and I worked in a venture capital firm prior to starting my entrepreneurial career. I knew exactly what's going through those VCs' heads when they see a pitch in a space where there is no previous example of like a venture scale outcome, right? And if you look at, and there's a lot of cool technology and certainly like, I don't mean to disrespect the category at all, but if you look at the realm of PRM systems or you look at the realm of businesses that have sold into this persona of partnership people, there's not like a $100 billion market cap like IPO company, right? These companies tend to get to the low tens of millions of revenue and then growth slows into the sub 20% range. They kind of get passed around by private equity firms for their eternity. And not a bad business, but when you're pitching a venture capital firm, it is a bad business because they're in the business of making 10 to 100 times their money in a relatively short time horizon and never ever hitting a ceiling where the growth kind of gets into that, those lower bounds. So I knew that one of the hills I would have to climb in this journey was how to build something that turns partnership leaders into heroes and gives them superpowers by taking them outside of Partnership Island and actually making them matter to other departments inside the organization. And we say that in our seed deck. It's like, look, this is not a partner tech company. Like, ultimately, this is a data company. Like, you're making an investment in this fundamental piece of data infrastructure that every single company is going to need. And the agents of our success and the operators that are going to bring it to life are these partnership teams who, frankly, have been neglected and haven't had amazing technology built for themselves and have an opportunity to have a bigger impact than they've been able to have and quantify it more clearly. And we are going to unlock an incredible data asset in partnership with them. And then that data asset is going to change the way the companies sell. It's going to change the way the companies market. It's going to change the way the companies innovate and build out their products and think about the core value of their technologies. And it's going to happen at a very large enterprise scale. And that was the pitch from day one. And if you listen, embedded in that pitch is the category creation, because a big part of the category creation was saying, let's make folks in these partnership roles elevated and looked at not as a cost center or as kind of an amorphous source of value or ROI, but as something that is like an absolute existential necessity in order to bring this big value story to life. And that value story is bigger than, how much sourced or influenced revenue comes from the partner team. It's literally like, what is the story of how our business generates revenue, period? What are the components that go into how we generate pipeline and how we win deals? And it just so happens that, the partner ecosystem is the muscle that actually pulls those levers.
I think that's a great way to put it. And that was extremely valuable for anyone who's entrepreneurial and looking to build partner tech. I think that's a great blueprint to get started. Now, obviously, that narrative and approach worked for convincing investors to buy in and ultimately get you started on your fundraising track. Let's flip to your first set of customers, right? Which is, selling to them is totally different than selling to the VCs. What was the most important misconception that you had to kill kind of internally within your first batch of customers before people really started believing in the idea?
Yeah, look, we probably, the first year plus, probably the first 2 years, he had the bad side of network effects. So Crossbeam is a network effects business, right? It only works if everybody's on it. If you sign up for Crossbeam and none of your partners are on Crossbeam, you're going to have a bad day because you basically have just signed up for kind of pitching Crossbeam to all of your partners and enlisting them to come and join. And today, with 30,000 some odd companies on Crossbeam and like a crazy high percentage of the Cloud 100 and whatever, virtually any company that signs up, the partners that they care about, some decent percentage of them are on Crossbeam and using it, and it's all the glorious things that make the business so fun in this era. But back then, network effects worked against us because no one had any partners, and there was no such thing as single player mode on Crossbeam. Like, you can't sign up with no partners and like, I don't know, get a cool dashboard of what's going on inside of your CRM data. Like, we're just not in that game. So what we discovered in the early years was that the way to win was to sell companies in pairs only and to actually turn away companies from letting them sign up for the platform, access the platform, send out invitations, get time with our customer success teams unless they brought a partner with them. So this motion, which we call the joint jam session, ended up becoming like the lifeblood of the company in those early years because we only onboarded people in pairs. And by onboarding them in pairs, then everybody has a proof of value and they get that initial germ of, oh, wow, this works. I can speak to how it works and why it works. Now I'm going to send out a batch of invites to my other partners. Well, guess what? All those other partners that got invited, they don't have the single player mode problem because the second they join, they do have a partner who's on. It's the person that invited them, right? And then you get these incredible ripple effects where, we can continue running the joint jam sessions in new markets or sectors where we don't have any kind of population yet. But in the sectors where we have a footprint, we basically just grow the network by building these like concentric circles of ecosystems embedded within ecosystems around the ones that joined, right? So like you look at like year one, at the end of the year, we probably had 20 companies on it. And then year two, we had 100, and then it was 1,000, and then it was 5,000. And, the curve just kind of goes from there. And that's the way the network effects work. So your question was about like misconceptions. I think the misconception is that this stuff just spontaneously appeared one day, right? Like we're on year 7 of building this thing. At year 3.5, we still didn't really we were like less than $1 million in revenue, right? Like we still really did not have any true revenue scale. We had to solve the network before we solved the business model and the monetization. I think that was a big part of, why we raised capital early on and how we kind of have always played this as kind of like a long game kind of bet.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that journey. And as someone who's been using Crossbeam for 5 years now, I've seen that firsthand and how the product's evolved to really amplify the ecosystem effect, to make it so easy to invite a partner to join. And candidly, as one of the early power users, I was such a nerd and I was such a power user. I was consistently getting frustrated that my partners knew of Crossbeam but didn't know how to use it yet. And it takes two to tango to use your line. So literally led me to create this like 15-page user manual that I would share with my partners as a giveaway. It's like, hey, look, I need you to know how to use this tool so we can be productive together. Right?
Yeah, so. And that is so, you are so representative of the dream, right? Which is there's something in that network effect that inspires people to want their partners to succeed along with them. And by the way, there's something to the DNA of partnership professionals to want to have your partners succeed, right? So like these two things go hand in hand where the growth and adoption of our product has been driven so heavily by the very thing that the product is built to promote, which is these ecosystem effects and the careers and trajectories of the people that work in this field.
Love that. Cool. Now let's fast forward. Now you talked about how from day one you were set on the vision was to make the partnerships professionals the hero of the story and really that muscle. But if we fast forward today, still most partner leaders are struggling to justify their existence internally. So what did you learn about telling a story that ultimately wins budget and gets teams ready to build? Because the last thing I'll say is I've so appreciated how you've just been blunt, no bullshitter of like, hey, look, like it's not about hugs and chugs. And that was a big part of your book. It's like you need to be able to effectively story tell to justify your existence and to expand resources. So walk us through that.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that one of our early marketing leaders, this incredibly brilliant guy, Sean Blanda.
Love Sean.
I showed him, man. He coined this phrase, the partnership paradox, because we ran this survey for probably our first 5 years called the State of the Partner Ecosystem, the SOAP report. And we run this huge survey and get all the, partnership leaders to kind of respond on all these different dimensions. And there was this one thing, speaking of 2x2 matrix, that showed up every single time, which was if you ask a partnership professional how certain they are that they create an enormous amount of value for their companies and that the ROI is absolutely massive on their departments, it was like always 10 out of 10, like undeniably, demonstrably so successful. And then if you ask those same exact people later in the survey, the same question of like, what is the perception of the value as reflected in how much incremental investment you get, how many people you get to add to your team, the budget's available to you, 0 out of 10, right? So there's an exact inverse correlation between a partnership professional's conviction that they are creating tons of value for their company and the rate at which that company is actually showing them that they believe it. So there becomes this question then in that partnership paradox of, okay, how do you bridge that gap and how do you show it? And I think one of the things that's so hard is it's an extremely rational conclusion to say, what I'm going to do is build an amazing attribution model and I am going to keep score and I am going to show you every single piece of influence that we had and every single deal that was influenced by us, every single deal that was sourced by us, all of the data and documentation that we have to demonstrate that. And a lot of partner technology systems support this. A lot of people do this in Salesforce with custom fields. A lot of people do this in Google Sheets with just manual tracking. And we watched a lot of companies and partner teams go through this. And there's a tragedy to this, which is even when you do it, and even when you show the value and show your work and say, we've been tracking this field in Salesforce and it shows that these are the deals we influence, or we bought this PRM tool and we recorded all this and it shows that we do it, and you hand that to your CRO or your CEO, the tragedy is that they still don't believe it, and that the partner paradox doesn't change, and that there is not actually movement. And the reason for that is because that field you created in Salesforce, that PRM system that you stood up, that Google Sheet that you manage is your stuff. And it lives in your world, and it is your math that you are managing, again, on Partnership Island. And when you bring it to the table in a world where there is an entire revenue operations team, there's an entire analytics team, there's an entire marketing organization that quantifies and qualifies leads that come through the door and the different stages that they go to. If you are kind of doing this parallel track of measurement and ROI calculation and attribution that doesn't live inside the way the revenue organization itself actually functions and thinks about its success, you are still going to sound like background radiation that requires way too much cognitive load to have a CRO attempt to layer into their own stuff. So the answer is, and always has been, to as much as you may feel abandoned on that island, the solution is not to do more stuff on the island to hand over numbers. If you have to push it through an air gap, whether the numbers are good or not, they're not going to be received well. And this is where the deep embedded, joined at the hip integration between the partnerships function, the ops function, and the sales function is so absolutely critical. And it's the only configuration of teams and workflows that I've really, really seen work. And what's fascinating is when you get into those situations, you start to see a couple of things really quick. And one of them is that they actually have fewer metrics and less tracking. And when that paradox goes away, the number of times that people are like, well, is this sourced or is this influenced? Becomes like a sit down meeting that happens every single week. They just stop talking about it because like there is this undeniable just assimilation that has happened between the strategy that is driving partnerships and the totality of all of the pipeline that's getting generated, all of the deals that are getting processed. Like the teams that are using Crossbeam Sales Navigator, they're researching 100% of their deals through the lens of their ecosystem and what the ecosystem knows, whether the partner made a phone call for them or made the intro or sent them into a lead registration form. The sellers still want to know, what does my ecosystem know? Because it makes them pursue those deals better and smarter and win more of them and win them bigger and pull in partners when it helps. But if not, it's just intelligence, and that intelligence makes you operate better and focus on the right deals. And like, that's the model. And those things are so joining that you stop getting wrapped around the axle trying to measure things that nobody wants to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, that honestly was perhaps the best depiction of the real problem with modern partnerships data and why so many people are frustrated, where they have the right data, they have clear impact outcomes, but they're not speaking the same language. And I totally subscribe to that. And that's why the more you can use metrics that are being used by the revenue org, the better. But ultimately, a big thing I teach in my programs is you need to build these models and systems with those other counterparts. Like your CFO and the finance team needs to be a part of building the modeling. Your ops team certainly needs to be a part of modeling it out. Same thing with VP of sales or CRO, because they're going to have a 10x better chance of believing and trusting and wanting to leverage the data, as opposed to having this cognitive load kind of dissonance that you referenced earlier. So building with those folks is so key. I'm not sure if you resonate with that, but I love the way you kind of stated that.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Sweet. Cool. Well, that's a good segue into the next segment, which is on ecosystem data as a system of record. So you've been doing a lot of heavy lifting together with the Crossbeam team to kind of coin the phrase EQLs, ecosystem qualified leads, or the new MQLs, which is obviously catchy, but what internal change does that actually demand of a GTM org?
Yeah. So this is the thing where I think this concept of EQLs is a really powerful thing. And I am surprisingly maybe unopinionated on the implementation details and what has to happen inside of an org for it to really, really take hold.
Sure.
The important thing conceptually that I think you can get most people, not just partner people, but salespeople, marketers, whoever, on board with, is the fact that if you had a little peephole that you could look through in your CRM, and when you peeped in there, you could see what was in the CRMs of all your partners about this same account, that would be valuable, would it not? And the CRO says, oh, of course it would be valuable. That'd be amazing. Any seller you ever talk to says, that would be my dream. The marketers say, oh yeah, what we could do to build these, like this knowledge in these campaigns. And the thing you can say is, well, what knowledge you would bring back from having looked through that people? Well, you would know things like, are they buying? Who are the key contacts who are involved in deals when purchases actually get made? How quickly do they buy? What other technology products have they purchased in the past, and how recently, and in what order? Like, what else is in their stack? What else are they researching out there in the market, et cetera? And putting all those pieces together tells a story about propensity to buy, about relevancy of what you might be selling, about how you might want to personalize the features that you highlight, all these things. When those characteristics add up to a level where it says, okay, this is actually someone we probably should be focusing on, selling to, customizing our pitch for, and the way in which we're pursuing them and the fact that we're pursuing them has been influenced by this knowledge we got by looking through this people, that means that lead is ecosystem qualified. You are elevating the probability that you're going to close business with that company based on knowledge that you procured through your partner ecosystem, through that people. By the way, that people is Crossbeam, right? That's literally what we do. We kind of unlock that motion of getting CRM data on select targeted accounts that matter from your partners in a secure way. So because of that, this concept that is that is like a winning pitch 100 times out of 100. Like everybody is like bobbing their head hard and nodding from an SDR to the CEO to the boardroom as we walk through what I just said. And if you got them on that hook, then you can say, okay, the value of unearthing that data then becomes not just part of another classification like marketing qualified, sales qualified, whatever, but it really is buying signal, right? It is part of the overall formula and the overall calculus by which you as a company decide to spend time and energy and resources going after an account, and you figure out how to go about going after them. It's less like a qualification stage, where in most companies, like you're an MQL first because you filled out a form or went to a webinar, and then an SDR talks to you and they say, oh, this really is interesting. And then you become sales qualified. And then an account exec might talk to you, and then they can decide to open up an opportunity that goes through different stages. It's like part of that qualification journey. And EQL, you could argue that it sits around the same realm as an MQL because it's used for qualification. But that same data that powers the EQL actually then becomes useful to the person that's having that conversation to make it a SQL, and to the account exec that's moving it through these opportunity stages. So there's this like ecosystem intelligence layer that is like a through line throughout the process of selling to an account, all powered by the same stuff. But at the very earliest kind of origin stages, the universe of EQLs is a pipeline generation motion, right? And it's probably most akin to an MQL in terms of where it is in that journey.
Yeah, I love the people analogy. I don't know if you leverage that at all in your marketing or sales, but I think that like really crystallizes the concept. One thing I want to double down on around the specific use cases is on the enrichment of account targeting, right? So one of my personal favorite use cases is in, say, an ABM marketing campaign, or you're building a top 100 strategic accounts for your company to go after. You know, in my most recent role, we formally had kind of ecosystem overlap as a 20% weight kind of in scoring accounts. So we take 10,000 prospective accounts and we'd use all these weighting and scoring models. And ecosystem insights was one of the top weighted parameters, so to speak, to help us stack rank accounts. Are you starting to see that more and more? And obviously, we're using Crossbeam for this. Are you starting to see more and more? Because I imagine that's a pretty strong leading indicator that this movement towards EQL as a nominally accepted kind of life cycle stage or element is taking off.
Yeah, it's so fun getting to especially work with more and more large enterprise companies, mainly just because they have operational scale and data volume that is absolutely mind-blowing. And what you describe is absolutely true, and I think is relevant for companies of all scales, right? Like you can apply this ecosystem qualification as like a heavy weight in the math of, you know, who a rep gets assigned to or whatever else. What we're seeing in some enterprises that's kind of like a yes and on top of that is the ecosystem data is actually governing the territory assignment process.
Right.
So like the decision around which reps get which deals, which used to be because like, hey, Sarah lives in Nevada, so she's going to get the Las Vegas deals, and then Tim's in Chicago, he's going to get the Midwest deals. Those lines around geography or the lines around how many employees a company has or whatever else, they're also being cut by this new dimension, which is like, what ecosystem is this company already buying from or participating in, right? Like, are they, it's an e-commerce company we want to sell to? Are they on Shopify and buying stuff in the Shopify ecosystem? Or are they over in the like Adobe Magento land and buying stuff in that realm? And like, you know, if you are a technology provider that exists in both those ecosystems and sells to companies of both those profiles, dividing your sales reps based on whether they sell to Shopify users or Magento users is like pretty freaking smart, honestly, because the language you speak, the other vendors you're going to run into, the reference calls that you want to give, the stories you want to tell, the accidental name drops that like make perfect sense or no sense depending on who you're talking to on your phone call. You can kind of align all that stuff so that you've got this massive messaging alignment, targeting alignment, momentum alignment among all the people that get assigned. So we're seeing there's a company that's got thousands of global sales reps that we saw this year, our data getting pulled in, among other dimensions and variables, but getting pulled into this territory assignment process and kind of doing a decent amount of reshaping as to which reps are selling to which companies. Just a really cool extension of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sure shine of just the evolution of Crossbeam as a platform to really like have a tangible impact on the whole revenue org as a whole, not just the partnerships function. Cool. So I think we're all sold on the kind of the belief. Now let's get into the machinery of kind of how this works, specifically the EQL engine. So let's just say I'm a first-time partner leader at a Series B startup. I want to operationalize EQLs. On Monday morning, what are the moves that I should be making?
Yeah, so if you're a Series B startup, you've probably got a direct sales team that's got, less than 100, but maybe more than 5 quota-carrying sales reps that are on that team. You probably got a product that's mature enough that you've got at least some technology partners. Maybe if you're really good with your community plays, you've got some service providers as well that are helping stand up and implement your solutions. Step 0, which hopefully has already happened, but if not, you can run at it fast, is just to stand up and turn on Crossbeam and connect with all of those partners that you already have pre-existing partnerships with. To get the data pipelines flowing. And that'll serve kind of 2 purposes. One is you'll get a really, really good view of who your most valuable partners are. And if you read the ecosystem-led growth book, there's a bunch of ways that you can quantify that and identify market opportunities and prioritize your partners, who you invest in. But in addition to that, what you'll automatically get is for every single one of those partners, this beautiful account mapping matrix, right? You'll know which customers do you have in common, which companies are you selling to at the same time, which of the companies that you are selling to are already customers of that partner, who are the companies that you're not selling to at all that are customers of that partner, right? That are kind of in your prospects list that have never been brought to the opportunity level. And all of that information is interesting on the day that you turn those on. Where it gets really interesting is the next day when some of it changes, right? Like your partner closes a new customer, your partner opens 7 new opportunities. One of the opportunities they had advances by a stage, right? Like the knowledge about how that data changes over time is really, really interesting and rich signal that's extremely actionable and timely, right? So as you get all that turned on, then you have this really exciting opportunity to operationalize that data. And this is the thing I'm actually doing on day 1, which is like I am getting a Crossbeam Sales Navigator seat for every single one of my sales reps. Because what Sales Navigator does is either embedded in the CRM or in the Crossbeam UI, dealer's choice. You get this beautiful view as a seller of every single company that's in your book of business and this ecosystem snapshot of what other companies are working with this business, for how long, when those changes happened, who are the contacts and relationships that exist within the ecosystem that you are and are not already talking to, and kind of what is the propensity for this company to be likely to buy based on all these factors, kind of calculated by Crossbeam through all this Crossbeam signal data. And additionally, to your book of business, if you're a company that has an outbound motion, you also get this separate pipeline generation functionality within DealNav, which is who are you not talking to that's not an assigned account where we think there's opportunity. If I'm a sales rep and I'm allowed to claim business or build my own business or do outbound, this is an absolute goldmine that I can be watching like a hawk, right? To kind of cultivate and shortcut the outbound process to find where the most interesting things that the company is not pursuing it sit. And if you have an SDR function or a demand gen function, it's also kind of a superpower for those folks to be able to use it for the same purposes. So that real quick, like 1-2 punch of get the data flowing and get people in Sales Navigator is just a really, really, really short and direct path to value that I think, and by the way, immediately gets at what we were talking about earlier in this call, which is removing the air gap. Like it creates this immediacy of value and context and transparency for sales reps where that knowledge is powerful and useful and actionable. But it doesn't mean the sales rep is going to bother every single partner on every single deal. Like what they're really doing is getting this additional intelligence layer that doesn't require a phone call in order to have it change your behavior in a positive way.
Yeah, I love that. That is a perfect breakdown of those first couple key steps, especially kind of getting the engine up and running, especially on the insights side of things. The next question is how do you actually turn those signals into actual demand to actually engage your market? So this next question is around partner GTM. And you've been on record saying, it's data, it's content, it's timing, and that the best campaigns sit at the intersection of data, content, and timing. So the next question is, can you walk us through how to actually operationalize that? How do you actually achieve that trifecta that leads to huge conversions?
Yeah, that data content timing thing is, I'm glad you bring that up because I haven't been doing that stump speed shit in a while, but I believe in it so much. So it's a great opportunity to like revisit that. Like I, I am, uh, I am someone who inherently is extremely skeptical of outbound and outbound motions for demand generation, as I am also skeptical of advertising and I am skeptical of basically anything that turns like ice cold into boiling hot or claims to through some kind of touch or series of touches. And the reason that I'm skeptical of it is because I have run a bunch of companies. Some of them have worked, some of them have not. And I have run the exact same identical outbound playbook in all of them. And there is one thing that is always true, which is if my company has product market fit and there is an inherent pre-existing need that already exists in the average person in the market that I'm reaching out to, and they're interested in talking about that thing and learning more and engaging as an underlying like background condition of what's going on in the market, my outbound team looks like geniuses. They blow their numbers out of the water. They're super successful. And everybody says, what are you doing? Who's the amazing hire you made? What are you doing to like automate the sends or customize the content? It has nothing to do with any of that. Because in the companies where we didn't have product market fit or we fell out of product market fit or the average person just didn't want to talk about the thing that we were talking about, it was like not at the right part of the Gartner hype cycle curve in that given moment, our outbound teams looked like, you know, JV.
Terrible.
They looked like they didn't know what they were doing, right? So this, like the connection here is that doing outbound effectively, doing advertising effectively, doing ABM effectively, doing anything that, again, like the idea is it's going to take the non-existent and make it exist. There is a condition that needs to be met first, which is that there are people out there that are actually already in need of your product and maybe even actively discussing it, and you just can't see it yet. You haven't been able to see it. And how do you figure out where those people are? Now, if you work at like OpenAI today, fish in a barrel, you don't really need to do that much work. It's everybody. Just call, you know, like your problem is not, you know, chasing down those needles in the haystack. The problem is how do we eat all this hay? So in most businesses, though, it is needles in haystacks. And this is where the data and the timing and the messaging get to combine, because the data can tell you where those needles exist. The messaging can make sure that what you say activates whatever that, oh yeah, we were just talking about that, or oh yeah, this actually is a problem space that we're grappling with right now, and oh yeah, this message is unique, right? Like, sure, everybody wants to sell more. How many emails do I get to say, hey, do you want to, you know, generate more leads next quarter? That's a bad message. Like, there's saturation. But being able to say, hey, I know you're partnered closely with HubSpot, and there's you know, an ability for you to leverage that ecosystem to generate demand among HubSpot's existing customers. Like, now you kind of got my attention because it's speaking my language about what I know I have available, and it's unlocking a playbook that feels proprietary to me and very, very interesting, right? So like data, timing, messaging can kind of combine there. But
100%.
You know, that's, and then when you unlock that, it doesn't matter what your medium is, in my opinion. Like, hire a team of SDRs, fantastic. Just arm them with the right data, timing, messaging. Buy a bunch of ads to like retarget and follow people around. Sure, but follow the right people with the right messaging at the right time. And the ecosystem data, I've never seen a more powerful data asset for providing that unlock that we're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And I've lived it as a power user of Crossbeam for years, kind of illuminating the best fit companies to go after, associating the partner overlap. And what I'm increasingly excited about is the one challenge is how do you actually know who's looking to buy at a given time? And like the Copilot, all of these things are really helping you not just know, okay, which companies are surrounded by my partner ecosystem, but who's kind of maybe at a sweet spot in their life cycle that they might even want to procure as a solution like mine. I think that really helps kind of 10x the value. Time to pivot, take us into one of the last segments. Obviously, I have to talk about AI and the role of AI in partnerships. Crossbeam is sitting on an incredibly rich SaaS graph, so to speak, of overlap and intent data. So my next question for you is, what's one AI use case you're most bullish on for your customers in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I talked a little bit a few moments ago about signals, buying signals. And, you know, the tricky thing about the Crossbeam data and the unlock of getting your hands on this data asset is, especially when you're looking at how it changes and not just what the stateful version of the data is,
Right.
there can be a lot of data there. And every single change that exists in every single one of your partners' CRM systems, on every single deal that's in your CRM system, it amounts to this absolutely incredible fire hose of information. And if you're a sales rep and you're tracking, 20 deals that you hope to win this quarter, it's a consumable, manageable amount of information. You can stay on top of it. But if you're thinking more kind of systemically as a company about making sure that you're capitalizing on every single opportunity of kind of these windows to jump on to attempt to initiate an opportunity or close a sale or augment a deal in a positive way, being able to stay on top of the totality of all of that has always kind of been the challenge, because there's just so much data. And as you get more successful, ironically, you get more data because the companies you can sell to become larger, your ecosystem becomes larger, et cetera. So one of the places that we're seeing AI be so profoundly powerful is that it's really, really good at consuming this fire hose of what can very often be somewhat unstructured data that is coming in from this wide variety of places, right? If you've got 50 partners and 30 of them are on Salesforce and 15 of them are on HubSpot and 4 of them uploaded CSV and one of them's got a Google Sheet that's feeding you data and they're all sharing different fields from their CRMs. Crossbeam has always been very good at distilling that into things that can be combined and looked at. But what about all the stuff that got lost in the distillation process, right? All those additional fragments of metadata that are kind of one-offs on this account or that account. The AI can see it all and it can process it all and it can contextualize it all and identify patterns. And this is where a lot of the stuff that we're doing with automated notifications, with the kind of deal scoring and rankings that exist in Deal Navigator, which are increasingly AI powered for us, the processing of this signal data into actual insights and recommendations and actions that either a human can take or an AI agent could actually take on behalf of a human or tee up on behalf of a human. That stuff is getting pretty cool. And we're starting to really see it, so much so that it's actually modifying the way that we build. If you look at our product roadmap right now, I don't know if this is going to be a popular thing to say or not, but I would say we're probably building more products for AI to consume than we are for humans to consume right now.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, thanks for sharing that, and obviously excited to see how that roadmap evolves. Let's take it internal now and focus actually on your workforce and on the people involved. Just to give you an example, Toby Luca, CEO at Shopify, famously in a leaked memo recently said, look, lean into AI or get left behind, so to speak. So curious, you've been vocal actually about flaunting the internal AI power users. You've been quite transparent about some of the things you're all doing. So how do you as CEO set expectations across the org and ultimately kind of push that mindset for teams without creating too much anxiety or inertia?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people look at Toby's memo and if you're a very natural response is that it's very, it's anti-human and it's cold and it's a little harsh. I think it's maybe one of the most humanistic things that has come out last year, because this is not he wasn't saying you're going to get left behind at Shopify. He was saying you're going to get left behind. And the most challenging thing as a founder to think of is to think of needing to, shrink a team or let go of employees or, due to a company's trajectory, not be able to keep good people. I think the second worst thing is to keep people and not have them evolve and advance in their careers and their personal potential during the time they spend with you. And I think I would almost rather have an employee for 2 years where it doesn't work out or they go to another opportunity or our team doesn't need them in that next chapter. But in that 2 years, they've leveled up their skills, their seniority, their professionalism, their strategic thinking ability, their operational, kind of expertise, and they walk away kind of better than how they got there in terms of their own personal earning potential and everything else. And I think part of the point that Toby's making is it's his responsibility as a founder of a company and as an employer of folks to make sure that they are continuing to advance. And the day that, they're less useful to the world than they were the day before, and it's because they were at his company, is a day that he's failing them massively, even if he continues to keep them employed. And I could not agree more with that, right? And I think I don't have any leaked memos or anything. Nobody would care anyway. But the thing that I do believe in, and I am pretty vocal about internally at Crossbeam, is like, look, we kind of get to pick, right? Like we're we're not going to miss payroll next week, and the company is in a fortunate position to have a cool product that has a good AI story that participates in this economy. But we all have this moment in time where we are employed and we're at a place that have access to this really interesting market and this really interesting technology, and we could choose to use this time to like get really good at it and understand it and harness it. And yeah, maybe we'll all get replaced by it in the next 5 years, and we'll cross that bridge and understand what that looks like. But what we're not going to do is get blindsided, and we're not going to do is get left behind. What we're not going to do is be confused or, play the blame game. I think if we don't embrace it and invest energy and be very, very, very proficient in it, then it's a guarantee that's the outcome. And I think the best that we can do is prepare people to play ball in whatever the version of the new world looks like.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it's a refreshing take from a notable CEO like yourself that I think people will really warmly respond to. And I totally agree with your view on Toby's post. You can't have it both ways. You can't, be critical of that type of messaging, but then, for someone else who might just lay people off and then kind of try to explain it after the fact, but with no upfront transparency, you can't complain about both of those. So I'm very much resonate with that approach.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. It's just like
Well said.
Yeah.
Cool. Last couple of questions. We'll try to make these quick hitters to make sure that we wrap up on time. I want to first talk about the book real quick, and then I also want to wrap up with the trajectory of Crossbeam. So your book, Ecosystem-Led Growth, really has become the unofficial handbook for partner pros. I've read it. I always recommend it to my mastermind community. I was fortunate enough to have a 2x2 matrix in there for partner prioritization. My one question on the book is, if you could write one more chapter today, what would the title be and why now?
Yeah, I mean, it's you've done a great job on this podcast asking the right questions, because we've already covered it, which is that last conversation about AI and the role that AI will play in kind of like where partnerships goes to remain relevant in an era where everything else is changing around it. I think, a lot of what we've talked about here today isn't even in the book. And it's almost like we've made an audio version of the second edition of Ecosystem-Led Growth here, right? Because like the extra chapter is about, taking the stateful data into time series data and understanding how things change and how that turns into signals and how those signals can be put into action to drive outcomes in the revenue organization, and how AI ultimately will probably become the number one consumer and actor upon those same signals.
Love that. Well, we appreciate that. The last question is actually a wildcard question. I posted yesterday advertising the fact that I was interviewing you today. So I let my audience tell me, hey, like, what's one question you'd love to ask Bob? So I picked one that I was personally most excited about, which is your expansion of Crossbeam scope beyond partnerships personas into sales tech. You've been really intentional. It's been very obvious in how the product roadmap has been shaped. You have the sales edge, everything you're doing with Copilot. So my one question from my network is, what's been the hardest part of shifting the narrative and unlocking that ultimately larger TAM, right, towards the sales persona?
Yeah. I think the actual hardest part has been, man, I have multiple answers, and all of them are going to upset somebody. I think the hardest part, look, let me tell you what the hardest part is, and it relates to the partnership paradox, and it's of no fault of the people in partnership roles, but I think it is worth saying out loud. The hardest part has been when partnership teams are the ones who walk us into the CRO's office, we can do worse than when we walk ourselves in. But the fact that we are being introduced by the people on Partnerships Island creates this like otherdom, and we get compartmentalized and pushed into the world of this partner stuff that's over there, and it makes it actually harder to demonstrate value and tell value stories that do not keep leading to a question that's like, what does this have to do with partnerships? And I think we've actually found in crafting this messaging for sellers that part of our journey is arming the people that we partner with in the partnership orgs to kind of find the right advocates and position us correctly and take the right pathways in, but also to kind of get permission to build a battle plan that involves us independently also going after sales leadership and sales ops and other folks in parallel with that. And that we did not realize that right away. And that was kind of a journey we had to go through to figure out that playbook.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the brutally honest answer, and I totally agree. And it's kind of a parallel kind of anecdote to kind of double down on that. You know, as a manager and leader, I'd get a lot of questions from partner managers that I manage, like, hey, like, why is my OTE less than AEs? Like, why do they always just have 250 OTEs? And why am I in like the 120s to 150 range? And I would always say it's like, you know, it always comes down to how many degrees of separation are you from money hitting the company bank account, right? AEs, it's there's no confusion, right? It's like they close the deal, boom, the money goes into the company bank account. For every degree of separation upper in the funnel, basically, that you go, it's just harder to justify and correlate your inputs to company outputs that we desire, right? So, and AEs are typically on a more of a 50-50 split. So that's kind of how I would explain it to them. And that, what you said reminding me of that is like, hey, look, like, it's not that your role isn't extremely valuable. It is, right? But if you're trying to get buy-in from the CRO, et cetera, you need to be speaking that language, dollars into the company bank account. So anyways, a little bit of a,
I agree. I think that part of my answer to that always is also like people are compensated for a couple of different things. One of them is the competitiveness of their talent set and how kind of proprietary and difficult, or this is a 2x2 matrix, right? How proprietary and difficult and unique is this account? But the other thing is how much risk you take on by actually taking on that role. And I think people that have this stance of like, oh, sales reps, they're just these, these jocks that go around and, sell people stuff that we can't deliver on and, make a whole bunch of money. I think the thing to remember is like, because so much of their compensation is variable, A, and B, because is probably the most fired role that exists in any modern organization is the quota carrying sales rep, that there is an enormous amount that you need to be compensated for in terms of personal financial risk that comes along with it. Like a sales rep in between roles because they, couldn't make quota and got fired probably has to live without income for many multiple quarters in order to line up their next thing. And then they've got a ramp up period before they can ever hope of earning anything beyond just their OTE. And like, you kind of have to you have to make a lot of hay while the sun is shining, because the risk associated with the downtimes of pursuing that career is really, really, really high, right? So in that 2x2 matrix, there are people with relatively lower risk careers that are very, very high value from a proprietary knowledge standpoint. That's your like top software engineers and things, right? And there are people that I think have proprietary talents but can be less proprietary than a software engineer and still somewhat commercial and transactional in nature, but maybe be taking on less risk inherently, less volatility, I'll say, inherently in their work. And I think partner professionals do kind of fall in that quadrant, right? It's like your skills are special, but not as special as like a PhD from MIT who knows how to like build LLMs from scratch. And your work is risky, but you do get a little bit more of a fudge factor that does get applied that makes the employment
and some tailwinds
longer and that kind of helps. And I think that's like your compensation reflects that accordingly. And like I never feel bad about compensating sales reps well, because I see the other side of what that career is like, and it's not always an easy ride.
Well, we definitely appreciate that. Look, we're at time, Bob. Seriously, this has been an extremely enjoyable conversation for me, and I can't wait for our audience to hear it. I'll be sure to link your book, link Crossbeam, and any other resources we can for your profile. But yeah, Bob, thanks so much for joining the show.
Amazing. And hey, if you're listening to this and you haven't read the book, I have in my personal stockpile another like 50 copies that are burning a hole in my pocket. Connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, and I can give you a link. I will send you a free copy of the book. First 50 people that hear this podcast and make it this far and are still listening. You got a free book. So shoot me a DM. Easy to find.
I'll put this. This will be the headline of the. This will be a lead magnet. Sweet. Cool, Bob. Well, thanks so much again.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Always a pleasure.